Hey y'all, so I figured I should talk about what it's like living with mental illness. I think because I thought more about the conversation I had with my sister last night, and it came upon me that I think a lot of how I tried to explain like how I feel in my situation was almost out of context in a way. Like I always think of the analogy of like a physical illness, like if I was in a wheelchair, or paralyzed, or had a broken foot or broken leg and I was wearing a cast and was on crutches or something like that, where, it's obvious that my daily routines are being affected by it, then that's like easier to understand. And I think you don't really explain that as much to people in terms of like, oh, you know, I wasn't able to do something today because blah, blah, blah. Because I felt like a lot of parts of our conversation actually had to do with like her explaining to me like why it wasn't logical for me to think a certain way, or why I should have empathy in certain situations where you know I understand my parents beat me because they wanted to make sure that I didn't get in trouble elsewhere, get in trouble with the police, or wanted to make sure I focused in school. I do have empathy for them. Like I understand, like, they grew up in a different time. My dad was beat by his parents or his dad. And I don't know about my mom. I don't think so. Maybe. I haven't asked her though, so I can't say. Um and I understand it completely. Like I understand like why they did it, that they didn't mean to do that. Like my dad has like cried in front of me, my mom has cried in front of me, just trying to resolve all of this trauma, going to family therapy, going to everything. um they've apologized, right? And she mentioned that too. It's like they've said sorry. Like what more do you need? And I think it's like I never mentioned, like, or I think I maybe tried but I couldn't really get at it, which is like living with mental illness. But it's like there's a chemical imbalance. It's something beyond my control in a way. That's why I take medication. That's why I go to psychotherapy, because I'm trying to rewire my brain in a way. Because growing up, during my youth and adolescence, my brain was pretty much structured in terms of like how I would think and survive in every day. And I think that was something I really missed in the conversation, and I think is missed generally when talking about mental illness and mental health is, just because you can't see it doesn't mean that, you know, it doesn't exist. And it also doesn't also mean that, you can just like outwit it with logic, or, try to outsmart it, because it's a disease or disorder or illness just like any other disease or disorder or illness. It's not like if somebody had a concussion, you could just tell them, well, just think harder, like, you know, or like, somebody with, a broken leg, and, they're like, well, like, like, like they didn't mean to hurt you, or I don't know. I can't really think of another good analogy, but I just thought the physical analogies were good because I think I've heard that before, and how people describe like why mental health is so important to understand, because yeah, they don't, I don't know, y'all. I'm also just trying to get like more authentic in these YouTube videos, because I also feel like mental illness is playing a role in that too, because of my complex PTSD. Like I have this constant fear of like saying something on the internet where I'll regret it for my life. And I made my first video about how I don't care anymore, and in a way that's still true. And I'm like, oh, I'm just gonna die one day and all this will just not even matter anymore. But at the same time, I'm always thinking like, because my life was so hell growing up, like if anybody in my family saw, or if my friends saw, and I'm 26, like I shouldn't care. It doesn't make sense. Like I can't bring this with me into my adulthood. And I think like separating from my family, giving me some time away from them, is going to help me like continue rewiring my brain. But yeah, like it stuck out like a sore thumb to me, because my sister was also like, everybody's tiptoeing around the fact that like, you've been like in this house for like 8 months or 7 months, and all year pretty much of 2025, and you haven't been doing anything. You've just been Ubering, and you know it's like you're not, we don't know if you're not motivated. And I think too, it's like she doesn't really know a lot of what I'm doing, partially because I never share what I'm doing. I think that's part of the illness too. It's just like I have trust issues and I never share what I'm doing. I always want to kind of be left out. I want to be silent, like quiet in the back. And I always downplay what I'm doing. I always minimize the accomplishments that I have. And I self-sabotage a lot. I self-sabotage anytime I'm close to success in a way I don't even want to be successful, not because of the reasons I said in my other video, but a lot of times because I feel like I would lose the dopamine chase of chasing success. Like once I get comfortable, it's like, because my dopamine is so low or out of balance, it's like, okay, like, what do I do at this point? How do that's why I like complete tasks super late, that's why I wait till the last minute to do things, because, and like I'm late for appointments and like, all these other things, is because I like to get that dopamine rush. It finally makes me feel something, right? And I try to explain the numbness, to her, and how I just feel numb. I haven't been able to feel things. And, I wrote it in my music, and we talked about that too, about how I wrote it in my music. And my mom was upset about me sharing the abuse and on the internet. And, that's also why I'm just keeping all this away from them, is because, like, she was upset before about me sharing about my abuse on the internet because she don't want to be seen in that light. And let me double check the time, because I have my counseling appointment at 1. It's 12:50. Okay. So, I'm always cautious about that. And I forgot even what I was saying. Like, see, this is how my mind works too, where it's like I'm always like in panic mode, and my mind literally goes blank in so many situations where, you'll ask me a question, or like we were having the conversation last night. I was like, oh, and then the fucking search bar disappeared on my Finder window. And I was like, do you know how to get the search bar back? Because I was like trying to show her like a pitch deck that I had made about for this one company, to show her that, like, I'd been working on this for, years, and kind of just gave up on it. And like other documents. And I was just like it wasn't even that I was super stressed to like try to find her to try to fix the issues. It was almost like I didn't want to actually solve the issue itself, because I knew that if I solved the issue, then it would in turn resolve the problem. And in a way, I like the self-harm. I like the problems. I like, the sadness in a way, because it's comforting. I don't know how to explain it. The sadness is almost, it's really comforting. Like, thinking about killing myself is very comforting. Like, even though it's like against the grain of like what I should be doing, like, it's comforting in a way, because it finally, I think, tells my brain like, hey, like, you don't have to go through this misery anymore, right? And I guess thinking about it like in a physical sense too, it's just like, imagine like you have this disease where, you feel so terrible every day, and you're just like, golly, like, I just want to end it. Like, I don't want to have to live the rest of my life in this excruciating pain, where they have like, end of life care, or, they have people that are being put to death. And it's a real thing. Like, I think that's something people don't understand about suicide either, is that, like, I talked about suicide with my sister, and it, I don't think it clicks. I don't think it clicks for her or my parents. I remember even when I told my parents, they kind of just like looked at me. My mom pulled out her phone and started reading about these stories about, kids that were committed suicide or were thinking about it. I don't know. But it was like the opposite of everything I needed in that moment, which was like a hug or like some sort of empathy, or, they just kind of sat there and looked at me. I think that's huge, because like, they're like, oh, like, you kind of just been sitting in this house for like 7 months. It's like, okay, well, if somebody was in the hospital, with the physical illness, and they were on the brink of like dying, and then they get released from the hospital and they're in a wheelchair or whatever, and they're like on a, breathalyzer, not a breathalyzer, I don't even know, like a breathing machine, and checking the time again. Okay, I'll probably talk for like 5 more minutes. Breathing machine, and, they come out and, they start, getting their health not even better, just like on a fucking equilibrium, like back to fucking like ground zero. And, being like, you've just been sitting on your ass for 7 months, like, what the hell, like. And then she was also like, like, you know, why don't you want to share your own location? I think I didn't mention this yesterday too, because she also mentioned it was a safety thing about sharing my location. And I was just like, I don't really give a fuck about sharing my safety. Like, I don't give a fuck. You think somebody that was about to kill themselves or thinking about killing themselves was thinking about another person thinking about their safety? I wasn't even thinking about my fucking safety. Like, I still want to die, but it's not active. It's a very passive, like, I actually don't want to die. I don't know. I don't want to die, but I don't want to live the life that I have. I think, you know, that's why I'm trying to change it and trying to separate myself from my family. But, yeah, it's like, I think if you maybe visualize it as like a physical illness sometimes instead of a mental illness where you can't really see anything. And it looks like on the surface, I'm okay. I'm talking, you know, I'm speaking English correctly and I'm not slurring words. I don't look like I'm sick, you know, but I'm taking all these pills and I'm going to therapy and I have these meetings with doctors and psychiatrists I got to see, and I gotta make sure my health insurance is always right because I got all these shits that I got to worry about. And, you know, it was just discouraging to me. I think I was thinking about that this morning because I was like, you know, we kept going back and forth about the logic of things. Like, it doesn't make sense. Like, why can't you have empathy and forgive? And, you know, and it's like I have. And I was like, I have moved on. And she was like, no, you haven't. Like, you know, you were talking about it in your music. And I'm like, I even still talk about it in my music. And I was like, well, I personally don't think that's like not moving on. Like, I think that's just part of my story and like part of who I am. Just like somebody got in an accident, you know, they keep talking about the accident. Like, it's not like they haven't moved on. It's just like that was a huge part of their life. They're obviously not trying to stay in that state anymore, but it changed literally the chemicals in their body. Like, you know, so I don't know. I don't know why I said I don't know, because I literally do know. I need to stop saying things like that where I just like discredit myself and like cut myself off, because I'm always like, I'm never direct. I need to be direct. And that's like what I'm so worried about. I'm so worried about being direct because then if I cut somebody, then they'll cut me back. And I'm worried about forming relationships because if I get too close, then I'll get hurt. It's just all this shit where, sorry, ran out of storage. I had to delete my recently deleted, but I don't even know what I was saying. I got the meeting in a couple of minutes, but yeah, I think I was saying it's all these things where, oh yeah, all these things that I think about that, you know, if you made a simple equation for it, you know, you'd be like, oh, y equals mx plus b. Like, you just plug in the numbers. But like, the problem with the illness or the disability is like, you can plug in all the correct numbers and you're still gonna get the wrong outcome because it's literally a chemical thing. Like, it's science. Like, it's not like us just chatting and being like, oh, like something, you know, I'm upset because somebody like, you know, dropped their coffee on my shirt. Like, it's deep. Like, complex trauma is deep. Unspecified schizophrenia is deep. Depression is deep. Anxiety is deep. These are not like ADHD. These are not like small things that just like, you know, I don't know. And I'm not saying that she was making them feel small, but I just think that if we're talking about empathy and we're talking about these things, like, I think it doesn't really do any use to try to like explain myself out of it and like reason, because it's not even about reasoning. It's an illness that I have to manage, you know. Not even like, okay, maybe one day I'll be fine, but like that one day, like, I've only been really out of the auspices of my parents for like a few years, you know, after college, you know, maybe you can say starting in college, you know, but still like so I'm just trying to get some room. All right, so I got my meeting, but thanks for watching this video. Leave a like or subscribe. I like never say that, but fuck it, we'll say it today. All right, I love you guys. See you next time.